Our company doesn't need the uneducated. If you only have a middle school diploma, disappear right now." Those were the harsh words spat out by Director Mark. He made it clear that no handover or procedures were necessary, ordering my immediate departure from the company. Feeling disheartened, I wondered if all my efforts had been in vain due to my lack of formal education. Months later, when Mark was running around screaming, "How come we can't produce our products anymore when we used to make $800 million a year?" I seized the opportunity to speak the truth. It marked my victory and his downfall. My name is Shane Miller. Born to alcoholic parents, I now reflect on whether I should have sought medical help for them. But as a child, witnessing their constant fights, sometimes even being dragged into them, was painful. Even when relatives helped them secure jobs, those opportunities never lasted long. Thus, during my elementary and middle school years, I practically lived at my Uncle Ken's small repair shop, attending school from there. Ken wasn't well regarded by other relatives, much like my parents. Though about 10 workers would come and go at his shop, only 4, including Ken, worked closely together. Despite this, his shop felt cramped, leading nosy relatives to doubt its functionality. Wondering what he was actually doing, they pointed fingers behind his back. It's understandable if they were confused, as Ken, with skills he taught himself, could fix anything from pot lids to the latest computers. He would boast about his abilities in front of me, saying, "How about that, Shane? It's cool and fun, right?" Despite being over 30 and having no intention of settling down, his reputation among relatives suffered. One day I asked him if, setting marriage aside, he ever wanted to join a bigger company, given his skills. Although just a kid at the time, it was an impertinent question. He laughed and said, "You know, that's impossible. I don't have the education. People without education can't get hired anywhere, so the only option is to make a living on your own." Though he laughed, he seemed somewhat lonely. As a child, I didn't fully understand his words. He kept exclaiming, "Cool and fun, right?" Without realizing it, I got swept up and ended up helping him with his work. Actually, it was fun. Thanks to that, I visited my home less and less until one day when I went back. I found that my parents had passed away. They died at the same time as a result of their heavy drinking. It wasn't from fighting, which was a relief to me. At that time, I was 17. After high school, I formally started working as a worker at Ken's shop. It had always been my playground. It was a workplace I knew well. I worked there without much pressure. However, less than a year after I started working, the shop was bought out by an electronics manufacturing company. Ken had connections, and he found employment for all his workers. For me, he humbly negotiated, and even though I only had a high school diploma, I was treated as a development department employee. He wore himself out with the merger, and he passed away when I was 20. Although he was exhausted towards the end, what I remember is his silly, bright smile, like a kid exclaiming, "Cool and fun, right?" In memory of my late uncle, I continued to work hard alone. Being a high school graduate and a small shop worker, many employees were cold to me. Other college graduates who joined later didn't treat me as a colleague. They treated me like an apprentice, ordering me to make coffee, take copies, and go shopping. However, a woman named Johanna Phillips, who joined when I was 21, never looked down on me. "Hi, Ken. Good morning." She would greet me cheerfully every morning. She taught me everything about being a professional that I hadn't fully grasped yet. Yes, that's how you talk on the phone as a business person. You should name yourself first when you meet someone new, and so on. "Oh, my dad, I asked your name first when we met for the first time, didn't I?" When I said that, she replied, "That's totally fine. We're colleagues in the same office. You'll try it with somebody else next time, okay?" Since then, we've been faithful coworkers. Another ally was the development director, Russell Nelson. Russell was an old friend of Ken's from high school. They went their separate ways when they went off to college, but Russell always seemed to keep an eye on Ken. He was the very person who brought up the idea of merging the company and the factory to Ken. So he was genuinely saddened when Ken fell ill. "It's all my responsibility from now on. I'll take care of your future," he said, shaking my hand firmly and warmly. Except for Johanna and Russell, the other employees, especially the executives, didn't give me the time of day. What's so great about that little privately owned shop? I have no idea. Despite the situation, by the time I was 28, even older colleagues would come asking, "Shane, how should I handle this?" And after I casually explained, they'd say, "Your explanation is so clear." Thank you. However, the coldness of the executives hasn't changed. Specifically, I've been working for about 10 years with almost no pay raise or promotions. It seems I just don't have any luck with that kind of thing. Russell has tried many times to improve my situation, especially this year. He really went the extra mile. "We can't let down your uncle," he said, but then a turning point came for him too. His mother in the countryside fell ill, and his father had already passed away. With no other relatives around, Russell had to take care of her. Considering his mother's situation, returning to his hometown was the best option. "Don't worry about me. Please go and be with your mother," I said. He apologized deeply and cried, "I'm sorry. It's really kind of you. I sincerely didn't want him, who had been so nice to me, to experience the pain of losing a family member. I wished deeply for his mother's well-being." Thus Russell left the company. A man named Mark Smith took the director's chair as his successor. He's 53, and apparently he was Russell's contemporary. It seemed he got his position even though he didn't understand development at all. That was a problem. He took on impossible schedules, and then there were cries of distress from the field. His response was, "If you don't like it, then quit." Such talk was tolerated in the company culture. It could even be said to be valued. Originally a small manufacturing company 10 years ago, a specialized integrated circuit we developed for businesses took off. Including the circuit itself and other products using it, it generated annual revenues of $800 million. The company views that more as the result of sales efforts than the developers' achievements. That's why, while our development department salaries haven't increased, the sales department looks down on us. Therefore, even within development, due to being a high school grad who rose from a small shop, Mark would pull me out during work and say, "You've been working here since you were a kid, right? Maybe it's time to graduate, huh? This isn't a school or a playground," and he'd mock me like that every chance he got. Besides, your uncle's shop only merged with us because of Russell's mercy, right? Both are gone now. Aren't you embarrassed to still be here? When he insults Ken and Russell like that, it makes my blood boil. Why do I have to be told that by someone like you? I snapped back. He replied with a cool face, "Well, because I graduated from college and you're just a high school grad. What's wrong with a college grad looking down on a high school grad?" His smirking face was so annoying that I accidentally kicked the desk. Seeing his startled face, I felt foolish and silently went back to my workstation. The next day, the desk work I had been handling was taken over by Mark. On top of that, I was told, "We can't have someone disrupting the flow," and I was kicked off the development work, regressing to making coffee, running copies, and doing errands like an apprentice. That's tyranny. You could sue and win, exactly. Johanna and other colleagues who appreciated me tried to advise him. I also wanted to take full responsibility for the work we were all progressing on. However, he didn't listen to anyone's input at all. Are you all kidding me? Instead of worrying about a high school grad colleague, you guys should be doing your own work, he would say. But ever since he took over the projects I was involved in, there had been no progress at all. I thought if he couldn't handle it, he shouldn't have taken it away in the first place. But he argued, basically, we're opening sales channels for enterprises. Selling something developed by a high school grad could affect our credibility, right? With his assertion, I even started thinking that he had a point. In a way, being mocked daily as a high school grad, I couldn't help but entertain such thoughts. Ken used to say, "Those without education can't get hired." Even so, the reason I'm here now is all thanks to him. At least that's an undeniable fact. That's why I could endure it when Mark targeted me personally. One day I did exactly as Mark told me and served him coffee. This is terrible. Can the high school grad even make a decent cup of coffee? He mocked exaggeratedly. Dealing with him became too tedious. As I stood there stunned, Johanna couldn't stand it any more and protested to him. "Why don't you make it yourself? Please stop using Shane like this." But he just snorted and changed his target to her. "What is it? Standing up for such a guy? Oh, I see. You're 33 this year, right? Supposed to be unmarried, a spinster trying to curry favor by respecting a high school grad colleague, trying to seduce him, huh?" "Oh, that's creepy," Mark sneered. I didn't listen to the end. My fist flew before he could finish. It was the first time I ever hit someone. Panicked as it was my first time, I didn't bother to check on Mark, nor did I speak to Johanna, whose face was flushed. I just shook and left the scene. When I came to work the next day, the only tasks left to me were menial, and even the semblance of a desk I had was gone without a trace. My colleagues were in turmoil. "What's going on?" Johanna murmured. Though I thought it was Mark's doing, I quickly learned from him, who had apparently come to work earlier, "As you see, you don't have a desk anymore. You're fired, can't even handle menial tasks, defy your boss, and on top of that, you hit him and skipped work. No reason to keep you around. Don't need any paperwork or anything. Just disappear already." As I listened to that, I realized there was no taking it back. I didn't intend to apologize even then. That's outrageous. How can a director just decide on his own to fire you? Johanna's voice trembled. Seeing her like that, Mark's face showed even more satisfaction, triumphant. That's the difference between having education or not. Our executives will listen to anything I say. A high school grad's fate can be manipulated anyway. An elite like me, who graduated from a well-known college, once it's all about freedom. I figured they would make such a decision. I had resigned myself to that, even when Ken passed. Except for Russell, no one said anything, not even sending a single flower to the funeral. Our company doesn't need the uneducated. If you're just a high school grad, disappear here, right now, Mark reiterated. I clenched my back teeth and felt like crying. However, I refused to cry in front of a guy like him. I fled the scene. I got discarded by the company I served for 10 years. I thought it was a total defeat. Ultimately, all my effort with Ken and Russell was just a waste. Right, that night, I was so frustrated I couldn't sleep, and when I woke up, it was past noon. It was around the time I would usually be at work when Johanna called me. "Can we meet now?" When I arrived at the cafe she specified, there was Johanna in casual clothes, unfamiliar to me, waving with a smile. "Hey, right here. What happened to your job then?" Casually, she replied, "After you left yesterday, I quit the company too." "What?" When I complained to Mark, he said, "You're fired too. No need for procedures." So I thought, that's exactly what I want. That's pretty much getting fired because of me. I can't believe she lost her job over it, I pondered. So I stammered apologetically, and she began to speak with a smile. "Do you remember when I first joined the company?" According to her, back then, the executives would come up to her in a sleazy, distasteful manner and say things like, "Wow, this year's newbie is cute, huh? How about I personally teach you some tricks of the trade?" When I said, "Please stop, it's unbecoming. Before teaching the newbie the tricks of the trade, maybe you should learn some basic decency," I apparently took them by surprise. "Cheeky brat," they'd say, and I'd reply, "Don't let a kid tell you this," and they'd shut up. It was so satisfying. Johanna said. But it's always been known that the executives are like that, not just with her. Russell, the only sensible one, suffered a lot because of it. I think he absorbed Ken's shop because he wanted some allies for you, Shane. The executive's behavior is nothing new. I was just one of the many you've helped over time, but since that time I've trusted you, to put it bluntly. I like you. That's why I've been putting up with that company until yesterday. Oh, you say such heart-racing things so casually. I was momentarily taken aback, but to assure myself it wasn't in that way, I teased her. I do like you. That's why I followed you and quit the company, she said, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Actually, as a 28-year-old guy, while not hoping too much, I had grown quite fond of her. Being pressed that she liked me did make me a bit anxious. Okay, setting that aside, just as I was thinking she had moved on from quite a topic, she told me about her astonishing plans for the future. I was truly surprised, and suddenly all thoughts of liking or whatever had to be put aside. 3 months after implementing those plans, Johanna and I returned to the company that had pushed us out. Just before that, Mark had been calling us, frantically demanding, "What's going on? Explain this." Finally finding time to deal with him, we went all the way to see him. The company used to thrive even with incompetent executives, but now it lacks any vitality. Mentioning Mark, who was standing in front of us, he looked worn out and lifeless like a zombie. Seeing me, he repeated what he had been saying on the phone. "What's going on? Explain this," like a broken toy. "The moment I fired you, our company's products, which used to bring in $800 million annually, can't be produced. What's going on? Explain that." When he got a bit more specific, Johanna answered him in an exasperated tone. "It's been 3 months, and you still don't understand the situation. Shouldn't it be obvious if you think about it a little? Did you really go to college?" She said it emotionlessly, but it seemed to hit Mark even harder. He hung his head, unable to reply. It seemed he understood everything, but was too stubborn to admit it. Out of desperation, "Basically, I hold the patents for the company's products. That includes related items that use them." Lies. No way a high school grad like you could manage that. He finally started to throw a tantrum like a child. Just as I was thinking he was beyond hope, a familiar voice came from behind us. "Mark, everything was written in the handover documents, wasn't it? Did you skip over them? You were too upset about being moved to development to pay attention, right? That's quite careless." It was Russell. He came to help us after his mother had recovered, but you know this guy, he's just a high school grad. Mark could barely speak. That was natural just because our former company, meaning his company, had finally gone bankrupt. Today, we came to give him a reality check, as he is still in denial, refusing to leave his desk. The bankruptcy was largely due to the negligence of Mark and the other executives concerning the patents. During my time with Ken, I had managed to develop highly convenient integrated circuits. Watching him repair things, I came up with ideas. Then, with the help of the workers, I managed to create something sellable. He would exclaim, "This could sell. Awesome, Shane." Later, I consulted with Russell, who was close to Ken. Based on that, it led to the merger of the factory and the company. Though the company was initially reluctant to accept the employment of all the employees, saying, "It's impossible to bring in people from a factory with no education and no proven track record into the company," Ken passed away exhausted by those dealings. Because they underestimated us, I was able to protect my patents with Ken's guidance, without handing them over to the company. Even after my circuits became a huge hit, they thought, "We can take any patent from a young upstart like him," and neglected to monitor the patent situation, assuming someone else would handle it. During the transition, Mark failed to check what specific work I was doing or whether I held any patents, simply dismissing me as a presumptuous high school grad. Everyone underestimated me as if I was an incompetent guy. As Johanna piled on the pressure, she said to Mark, Shane's patents have already sold to another company for $100 million. With that money, Shane and I have started a new venture with the help of Russell. I do also appreciate your support, Russell said humbly. You would never approve of that. Indeed, the CEO hadn't wanted to approve it, but I had already sold the patents before telling him. Thus, all I could say to Mark was, "There's nothing you can do about it now, you, a high school grad, being so presumptuous." He was more like a broken toy, or maybe actually broken. "To the high school grad, you've thoroughly lost," I declared. The broken man's eyes widened in frustration, and he fell silent, leaving him speechless. The three of us walked away. After all, we had a mountain of work to do. Eventually, the company I started launched products that became smash hits one after another. As the company grew, I scouted colleagues from my former company who had supported me, making them new employees. They all came apologizing, "Sorry we couldn't help you back then." Just hearing that felt somewhat redeeming. In fact, I had reached out to all the employees of the company even before it went bankrupt, including Mark. Needless to say, the executives refused to work under a high school grad like me. They actually had been riding on the coattails of my products. Though there was naturally no chance of them recovering, what happened to them after the bankruptcy? I don't know. All I hear are rumors that they can't find jobs or keep getting fired. Now working with colleagues who truly appreciate my abilities feels like erasing all the harassment I suffered under Mark and even erasing the fact I lamented. I guess it's because I don't have a degree. I don't care anymore. It doesn't matter to me what happens to them. The issue now is about the time Johanna casually mentioned she liked me during a conversation. I pretended to forget about it because of work, but she has always been my emotional support. Of course, I was thrilled to be liked. It's time to show what kind of man you are. I'm sure your parents and Ken would want that. Russell encouraged me, and I confessed to Johanna, intending it as a little payback. "By the way, I like you," I said in the middle of a casual conversation. But she replied with a smile, "I know. Let's get married. That's how we are planning to get married soon." Thinking about it, it wasn't school but Ken who taught me everything. So there was never any need to worry about not having a formal education. I thanked my late uncle in my heart, thinking, "Ken, I become happy without a degree thanks to you." Keep watching.